Radis is White House bureau chief with West Wing Reports. He says reporters are concerned.
When she met with reporters yesterday, Sunday, I was not there on Sunday, but I know that people who were with her yesterday have said they're extra concerned now and they're going to get double tested.
And a gym chain in the UK has apologised after one of its branches advertised a workout called 12 Years of Slave to celebrate Black History Month. The exercise routine video, which has been taken down, was posted on the Luton and Dunstable branches Facebook page earlier with the caption, "Slavery was hard and so is this." Pure Gym described it as wholly unacceptable and not approved or endorsed by the company. That's it for now. More in an hour.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA. For great value van insurance, go online to theaa.ie.
Showers across much of the country tonight, heaviest in the west with a risk of hail, lowest temperatures of 7 to 11 degrees. Now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
This is News Talk.
Well, how you doing? Joe Molloy with you this evening. What a 24 hours on the COVID front. The Neffet leak last night. I'm sure everybody slept very well last night after everything. Level 5 hanging over everyone. Now it seems Level 3 nationwide will be announced. We will bring you Micheál Martin's speech live from government buildings as soon as he emerges this evening. The Cabinet sat down at 5:30. In a few moments as well, we will talk to the GAA's Alan Milton and Professor Anthony Staines from DCU. We recorded a virtual roadshow with Gary Neville and Teddy Sheringham on Friday. Loads of good stuff in this. We did close to 2 hours with the lads, but we will bring you the best bits, a taster between 8 and 9 on the radio this evening. The full chat available in all the usual places to podcast and download. And then, I mean, the madness of the football yesterday, somehow that is relegated here this evening. It's that kind of day. But the madness of yesterday at Villa Park and Old Trafford, we will talk to Pat Nevin after 9 o'clock. 53106 is the text number. We are at Off the Ball on Twitter. But our first story, Level 3 nationwide expected to be confirmed by government this evening in spite of Neffet recommending Level 5. We will cross over to Micheál Martin when he emerges to give his speech at government buildings. First, though, very happy to say we have Alan Milton with us, GAA Press Department, and Professor Anthony Staines from DCU. Gents, thanks for the time this evening. Anthony, if I could start with you. Firstly, was drastic action required at this point, and then your reaction to the government going for Level 3 against Neffet advice of Level 5?
I think drastic action is required. We're seeing rising numbers of cases, rising numbers of hospital admissions, rising numbers in ICU. One thing to remember is the number of cases we have today reflects the number of infections maybe 5 days, 10 days ago. So we don't know what's going on now, but whatever it is, it's probably worse. So the government had to respond to that. Neffet made a recommendation which is for national restrictions, quite significant and severe restrictions. And I think if we want to bring the number of cases down, and that is that the policy is to what they call strongly suppress the virus, to reduce the number of cases to a level our health service can cope with. If we want to do that, we need quite significant restrictions and we need to apply them across the country. We then, I think, need to move very quickly to running the restrictions county by county based on local knowledge, local public health advice, and what's happening locally. So there are counties where there's very few cases, where the number of cases could be brought down very quickly. And there's counties, and unfortunately, Dublin, where I live, is one of them, where there's a very large number of cases and it will be a much slower process. So I think start national, but work fairly quickly towards the regionals would be my thought on it.
And your thoughts on the government saying, we hear what you're saying, Neffet, but we'll go with Level 3?
I think it's a mistake. I think we will find ourselves in 2 weeks' time. I hope I'm wrong, by the way. I hope this does work. But I think and fear that we will find ourselves in 2 weeks' time saying, well, we should have gone to Level 4 or Level 5. Let's do it now. And it's the nature of this disease that it spreads quickly. So the number of cases goes up very quickly. We had, I think, 500 and something cases today. We could easily have 800 or 900 cases a day in 2 weeks' time. And that's going to put a terrible pressure on our health services. So there is a real and legitimate fear that our health services will be seriously stressed by everything that's going on. And we need to deal with that. And I think the earlier we take action and the more decisive the action, the lower the costs. This virus is causing huge economic damage. If we can bring it down to lower levels, there'll be less economic damage. And when we do get to bringing it down to lower levels, then we can have the conversation. Do we want to follow New Zealand? Do we want to follow Australia and try and bring it down to zero, which is what my colleagues and I would advocate? Or do we want to keep it at a low level? But in either case, we have to bring it down to a low level before we get anywhere else.
Yeah. How does the preparedness of the health system now compare to last March and April?
We're more ready for it clinically. So we are more geared up as clinicians. My clinical colleagues understand this better. We are not really more geared up in terms of capacity. Before COVID was ever heard of, most people in the services thought this winter was going to be very bad indeed. COVID is going to make this winter genuinely dire. There is every prospect that we will run out of basic health service capacity over the winter unless we bring the number of cases down. Our health service normally operates at about 99% bed capacity in hospitals. Our community care services, our general practice services are very under-resourced. We have a service that puts money in the wrong places. So to cope with COVID, we're going to need to do a lot of stuff very quickly, but we also need to set ourselves on a path for longer term reform. Paul Reid made the suggestion, I think it was a lot of merit in it. What we should try and do is to do sláinte care in about 30 months rather than 10 years. And I think we could. But we've got to do something right now to get through the winter.
One last one, Anthony, before I bring in Alan Milton from the GAA, who's standing by patiently. This was pitched earlier on, I noticed. NEFIT almost saying it's level 5 to keep the schools open. You know, this was being pitched as it's the economy or the schools. To what extent are the schools currently contributing to the growth in cases, or do we know?
We don't absolutely know. There's very recent work from India which says that this disease spreads more in schools than have been realised. So they're contributing part of it, but unlike flu, where schools are absolutely key to the spread of influenza, that doesn't seem to be true for COVID. I'm more worried about the colleges, the third level colleges, and older school children in secondary school than I am about younger school children in primary schools.
Okay. Jim has texted in to say, Jesus, lads, enough. This is a sports show. Give me a break from the bleeding news already. I hear you, Jim. I apologise. Alan Milton from the GAA is with us. Evening, Alan.
Good evening.
So, level 3 means no sporting events bar professional or elite matches. That includes adult club and inter-county matches being allowed to go ahead. Obviously, no spectators at those events. So, in accordance with level 3, you would be allowed to continue with the club fixtures. The GAA and the Ladies Association this afternoon went a step further. So all club matches stopped until further notice. Give us the rationale.
We've been watching this for some time, Joe, and there have been a number of incidents brought to our attention, both by members and from non-members, and we doubled down on our efforts last week. The GAA President John Horn had a conversation with Dr. Ronan Glynn, who asked for help in trying to get our membership to be more compliant when they were attending games and crucially after games. We contacted all our counties last week. We underlined the importance of adhering to this particular message, and some of the incidents that we saw over the weekend were in our book just unacceptable. So the decision we reached early this morning, and we hastily scheduled a management committee meeting to rubber stamp this or to discuss it, was that regardless of what the government were going to do, and there'd been a lot of speculation from 8 o'clock onwards last night, and there's still speculation because we don't have anything concrete, that we didn't feel comfortable standing over some of the incidents that were taking place, albeit some of them taking place outside our premises or our grounds. There was a broken line from our games to these incidents, some of the celebrating, and it's hard to fathom why people weren't able to socially distance better. I understand the passions involved in winning a championship indeed, especially in situations where they haven't been won in a long time. But we had just reached the tipping point, John, and in essence that's how the GAA arrived at the decision it arrived at today. OK, so regardless of level 5 or level 3, this is the situation that the GAA have as they've seen it. So
For how long is the question, Alan?
Well, as per the statement today, we are very fortunate, Joe, that we got a lot of our games played. We knew that it would have a positive effect on the island, on communities everywhere. But it hasn't been without its challenges, and we've learned a lot along the way. So we simply don't know. I can't answer that question at this moment in time. If things were to improve, and with the blessing of the civic authorities, it's something we might be able to revisit. As you're well aware, we have left training in place, and that was a really important distinction to make. So there is still a focus for people who want to stay fit and healthy while adhering to the guidelines, both children and adults alike. But we just felt that county finals and the passions they store up in people is a different beast entirely. And the inter-county game will take precedence in the next few weeks. I'd imagine most of the counties who, and I think it's 11 in total, who haven't been able to finish their championships, will review the situation either when their county teams bow out of the championship, or perhaps they'll see a window along the way in agreement with county managers.
So look, I mean, maybe you're reluctant to get into specifics, but I think everybody in the country has seen some of the pictures that you're referencing. The Black Rock supporters in Cork on Church Street, jumping up and down, no social distancing, effectively a parade, and supporters engulfing the team. That was one. I know the PSNI are investigating potential breaches of restrictions at the Derry senior final in Balahi. The health minister up there, Robin Swan, has said he's disappointed and angry. So there's just no communicating to people is clearly the conclusion that the GAA have come to when it comes to, as you said, the passions, winning. You know, the general responses from those involved then in Cork was, well, look, geez, if we can't celebrate this, when can we celebrate? You've obviously realised that human nature dictates that the message is not being adhered to.
Yeah, you haven't won a county title in 56 years, or you're from Killadangan and you've never won a county title. You know, it probably disarms you, and you just break out of the straitjacket that we've all been wearing societally. But that doesn't wash, unfortunately, and I don't know how you can explain that away. I think the GAA as an organisation has worked hard to build up trust, and that trust has been jeopardised. So what we saw last night, I'm not going to single out any clubs because there have been more incidents than that, Joe, and some of them haven't come to light in the public, but it's just not something we can stand over any longer, and that's why we moved as quickly as possible this morning. We weren't sure when the government were going to move. It didn't really matter. We spoke to the people we had to speak with, and we made the call on it. I think the fact that we'll have a welcome distraction with the inter-county game, provided it proceeds, and hopefully it will, we're certainly planning in that direction, means that people will have something to latch onto. They can still train away, but the idea of county finals now at this stage, having got as many of them played as we have, obviously there's junior and intermediate games as well that won't be able to go ahead. We were fortunate to get a lot of club activity played in a short space of time, but I think it needed a different approach today, and I think that's why the statement that was published earlier came to be. How
strongly did you consider continuing with the games but just having no fans whatsoever allowed?
Well, considered it, Joe, but we're back to the same old problem. After the match, we can't hold people's hands afterwards. You know, we don't know. A lot of these things are taking place in private residences. They're not even taking place in GAA clubs. So I think it'd be a little bit churlish of me to say, they've nothing to do with us. Of course they have something to do with us.
And so, Alan, that extends to the county championship, unfortunately.
I don't think it's the same animal, Joe, respectfully. I think the passion's aroused, and I do take the point if Waterford were to win a hurling championship or Mayo were to win, the way we're headed at the moment, there's every chance that our games will be played behind closed doors for a start, and I think then we'll have to have a different conversation with our wider membership, and it's a large membership, but I think there's something primal, and I mean that in a complimentary way, about the locality and the club winning that's different to the county winning. I'm not belittling the achievement of a county win either, but I think it's a different beast.
No, I understand what you're saying. I think a lot of us understand the difference. However, the logical conclusion, though, is if you're seeing celebrations like that after county matches, you're going to have to pull the plug in this thing, because the GAA don't want to stand over potential infections on the back of GAA matches. That is the conclusion.
I don't think they'd be as concentrated, put it like that. I think if a county is jubilant, and I think perhaps today's action might remind people that if maybe we had to reframe the narrative and the conversation before the start of the Inter-County Championship, we can start this championship and we intend to do so, but it behoves us all to behave in a way that doesn't jeopardise other members of society when we get excited about the games. And hopefully people will stay at home and watch them with families, and I just think it'll be a fantastic distraction for people to watch it in their homes. I hope they will. We don't know where we'll be come the middle or the end of the championship, but I think the last 48 hours have been sobering for everybody for a variety of reasons.
Yeah. So there were outbreaks in the Donegal squad and outbreaks in the Armagh squad. Will matches be forfeited, Alan?
Well, there's not a whole lot of wriggle room in the schedule, and Central Council have discussed this, and there are representatives of every county at it. So if it comes to pass, that's a very stark decision to have to be made. Having said that, I can count on one hand, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe a little bit more, to be fair, on how many massive outbreaks there were in club teams where games... Certain clubs pulled activity because of the mood music in the locality, but there is no evidence that there have been mass breakouts of positive cases. Obviously, teams have been stood down because of teams being players being quarantined or being self-isolated. But you might have heard last week it is our intention to introduce a fast-track testing scenario for the very condensed inter-county championship. But look, this is not a regular championship we're approaching into. This is not 2019.
Yeah.
You know, it's a very different championship. It comes with lots of caveats. And the question you asked me at the outset, will teams have to forfeit? I can't say categorically no, but I certainly hope it won't be the case, and we're planning in that direction.
Yeah, because I mean, there just has to be a level of discomfort here. Even you look at Armagh, you know, they're due to get underway when 17th of October, and then they're away to Clare, and then suddenly they're in championship action the following week. You know, if people celebrating on the street is a concern, then that has to be a concern as well. Is there any possibility or wiggle room in terms of the finale of the championship? Like, could it go to 2021?
It could in theory, yes. Like, as things stand, to the best of my knowledge, January and February are pretty much locked down. We were hoping that it would be kept as a closed season for players who would need a rest, perhaps after a busy club and county period of activity.
Yeah.
But it's not a scenario that we hope unfolds, but if it had to, you can rest assured everybody in society's had to be nimble, Joe. Everybody has to be flexible and adapt to the situation. It's been incredibly fluid, and if that challenge presents itself again, we'll look at it as it arises.
Anthony, I'm going to bring you in on this point in a second, but just want to put to you, Alan. So, look, the North has its own issues as well at the moment. 934 positive tests in the North on Friday. Alan, for instance, at Ulster's rugby match at the weekend, 600 fans were allowed in. We may very well, I would suspect, have different restrictions in the 26 counties and the 6 counties when it comes to fans who can attend. Will there be a GAA-wide policy, i.e. no fans, for instance, across the 32 counties, or will you be adhering the jurisdictions the games are happening in?
The law of the land will apply, Joe. We haven't come to a definite, because, this, as I said already, for fear of repeating myself, it's fluid and we don't know whether we're in Phase 3 or where we'll be after the 29th of October. But first and foremost, the law of the land applies. Nothing the GAA will do will contravene that. We've juggled this dual jurisdiction challenge since March the 13th. It hasn't been easy. One region has overtaken the other at times. Some have cried foul, saying we're being left behind, and then overtook the south, as happened once. So it's been a challenge all along. It will continue to be a challenge, but I don't think it's an insurmountable one.
OK. Anthony, do you want to come in on some of these points?
Yeah, I mean, the GAA are really responsible. They're dealing with bad behaviour from a small minority of their supporters. For the North, I think the North and the South are likely to work more closely together. There's been a lot of conversations between the two ministers recently last Friday. And I'd be optimistic that something useful will come out of that, some level of coordination.
Do you know what, Anthony? We're just in trouble with your line. We'll get you on a better line in just one moment.
Joe, is there one point I could just make to you? I know
yes,
it's all been doom and gloom from a GAA perspective, because it wasn't a decision that we reached lightly, and it wasn't one we wanted to take, but there was a degree of inevitability about it. But we reckoned we'd had over 20,000 games staged at juvenile and adult level, and I'd just like to echo the point of Professor Staines there. We're talking about a handful of fixtures, albeit a handful too many, but a handful of fixtures that presented these challenges to us. But I don't think there was any other way. I don't think you can expect county boards to be able to police it any better than they did in the vast majority of instances. And, there's an overarching collective responsibility here for everybody, in everything we do, not just going to a football or hurling match, but and that's just to provide some context in what was reached today.
Yeah, and look, I mean, and respectfully, like a couple of weeks ago when the association was asking Ronan Glynn for evidence, I didn't think that was appropriate, but to realistically acknowledge that the celebrations after a match are on the GAA's watch as well, I think is very admirable. And I think, you know, today is a very responsible move in many respects. Can I ask you about in the grounds though? Because there were photos, you know, the Derry final that I mentioned, saw the Meath final on a couple of tweets. It doesn't look like the 2 metres apart is being enforced all that well at times in certain locations of the ground, Alan. Whose responsibility is that at games to ensure that's being implemented? Is it county board? Is it down to officials associated with each club? Who ultimately takes responsibility for people sitting closer together than they should be in GAA stadiums?
The organising committee of a fixture, Joe, so if you're mentioning a given county championship, it's the county. I accept your point. This was put to me a few weeks ago about matches in Healy Park and Omagh, though, and we looked into it, and the relevant authorities from the government were in attendance at fixtures and said they had no problem, but the camera angles made it look like that there were no rows being left vacant. So while some are better than others, there's no doubt about that, some of the stadia are configured differently, so sometimes the optics are different as a result of that. But I think there's lessons that if there are any supporters going to be going to county fixtures in the next few weeks, that this has to be managed in a certain way, and if that's numbered tickets and seats actually sellotape down, they just aren't for use. We've seen it everywhere. We see it on the buses, we see it on the trains. It has to be exactly the same, and I think it requires a really high level of stewarding and perhaps guarded presence on occasion. But you'd like to think that having gone to such lengths to get permission or to get agreement to hold these fixtures, that, you know, it would be an act of folly to jeopardise them. So you'd be disappointed in some instances. In other instances, Joe, there are family members sitting together and they're perfectly entitled to do so. So there are a few variables here. It's not always possible to draw a black and white verdict on a television picture. No,
I accept that latter point. Anthony Staines, I think you're back with us.
Back again, I hope.
Yes, I hope so. Sorry, so you were making a wider point there about the GAA and just what you've heard from Alan Milton. We didn't quite hear what you had to say, if you want to give it a try again.
Yeah, I mean, they're being very responsible. A small proportion of the society have problems with misbehaviour. The majority of GAA support is being asked to do. You can ask no more than that. As for Northern Ireland, there's a lot more contact between the two jurisdictions about specifically COVID. The two ministers for health spoke on Monday, and I'd be optimistic that some level of coordination will come out, because we face very similar problems. And if we work together, we make it easier to control them and bring back our lives, bring back our sports, bring back our audiences.
Okay, listen, unfortunately that line is not quite behaving, but Anthony Staines from DCU, we thank you nonetheless. Thanks very much for your time. So Alan, just a final word from you. I mean, you've explained the rationale. Obviously, as you can imagine, there are some texts in feeling this is overly harsh on the club players and to just put the matches on absolutely behind closed doors. You've explained your rationale for not doing that. When will we have further decisions on club games? Or, well, I guess we're pretty much into county now anyway. We're talking about a weekend here.
I think you're talking towards the end of the month before. I think the date of October 29th has been mentioned. Look, as a citizen, Joe, I think I've been watching the figures like everybody else. It's nearly become a national pastime, unfortunately. But it doesn't seem to have been a massive improvement despite the lockdown measures that are in place in Dublin and Donegal. And I think we need answers as to why that is. And, you know, lots of us don't understand the behaviour of this virus as much as we'd like to. But just to take up that point you've put to me, the problem is not the behind closed doors. It's what's happening after the fixtures in many instances, and we don't and can't control that. So I think non-GA people will be out there asking, you know, have the GA no sense of responsibility? You know, have they no duty of care to the wider members of society? And I think that's the grounding, or that's the position we came from in the position we reached today. And
I presume there's a dialogue open with NEFIT or the government. When you're hearing about cases traced to the activities, say, around a GAA game, how many are we talking, and in particular, what activities do we suspect are causing the issues?
I don't have those figures to hand, Joe, but what I can say to you, there are absolutely minimal figures attached to the playing of the games and indeed the attendees at games as well. So if there are clusters in areas that have won county championships and it's not down to the playing and it's not down to the attendance at games, you can draw your own conclusions, because there's only one other serious element to the staging of a game, and that's the post-match scenario.
Okay. And a final one then. So with the county championship upon us, hopefully, what are the testing protocols there? Did you mention there was you fast-track testing?
Yeah, we had a media call last week, which Fergal McGill, who has represented the COVID committee, was on the call. So they were examining different options in the tender process in relation to companies that might be able to fast-track the introduction of a test and trace model, which will be far quicker turnaround. So that's being finalised, and hopefully we'll have more detail on that in the weeks ahead. Okay,
but in broad terms, that is some kind of testing mechanism, say, on the eve or of the weekend of a match for respective teams. Is that the aim?
Yeah, it's to alleviate the potential problem that you touched upon earlier, which is a very real one, whereby a large number of players on a given panel would have to be stood down while they were waiting on results. Okay. It would definitely provide more options and more flexibility in that regard.
Okay. Alan Milton from the GAA. Appreciate you coming on, Alan. Thanks so much. That's Alan Milton there with us from the GAA, explaining the rationale again. Despite the fact that GAA matches can go ahead, club matches can go ahead, they are postponing them for the foreseeable, realistically, until the county championship gets underway, which is upon us when on the 17th of October. Richie McCormack is with us. Hello.
Joe, how are you?
Sorry that all interrupted your news round, which is with thanks to Gillette. We don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters. Any thoughts on what Alan Milton or Anthony Staines had to say there, Rich?
Just immensely frustrating. I think the GAA should be, and I mentioned this to Kieran earlier on the hard shoulder, GAA should actually be commended for taking and reacting to the scenes that we saw on TV and elsewhere on social media over the course of the last week or so, especially because something needed to be done, a line needed to be drawn in the sand as regards those scenes where people weren't social distancing, whereby team photos were being big pylons, and we saw parades through streets in certain villages and so on. And people will say, yeah, like, you haven't won a county championship in so long, you can kind of understand it, but you can't. I think as Tommy Martin said earlier on, like, people, it isn't the GAA essentially that are behaving badly in terms of the virus and the reaction to it. It's more so the people's sensibility around it, I guess, has kind of wilted a little bit, and there is a sense that, oh, well, sure, I'll be grand, we'll be grand, and that needed to be nipped in the bud. I think the restrictions that are going to be imposed countrywide will do that to some degree over the course of the next day or two, we hope, but something again needs to be done. And I'd have to commend the GAA for actually coming out and putting in the restrictions as regards club games. But with that, there is a sense of frustration, because when we talk about club games being suspended for an indefinite period of time, you have to, and they mentioned all age grades, like, there are kids that are unable to play games and have been unable to play games pretty much against other teams in the main for the last 6-7 months now at this stage, and that's going to continue on probably until the end of the year, and who knows, maybe even beyond. We hope not, but there is a frustration that other people are paying for the sins of others.
Oh, there's no doubt. But like, the behaviour was just so ridiculous. I agree with you, and I think the GAA should be commended, because if they had stood over what happened at the weekend, that would just embolden those types of celebrations further. And they are ridiculous. And the people involved should have a good look at themselves, and they can justify it, and they can say, oh, you know, sure, if we can't celebrate this, what can we celebrate? And blah, blah, blah. It's nonsense. Like, let them go on a trip to hospitals. And like, you heard Anthony Staines there, his warning was stark. Like, the preparedness of the health system for this winter is not good. And we have that kind of carry on. It's embarrassing for the GAA, and I think for them to distance themselves from it centrally is really positive. Like, and we talked about when they called out Ronan Glynn a couple of weeks back. I didn't think that was good, but I think this absolutely is good. And I would also say, Rich, I don't know what your interpretation of it was, but I like reading between the lines there. And so Alan Milton was, you know, saying local versus county celebrations are less, you know, they're a bit more charged, and he doesn't anticipate those celebrations when it comes to county matches. This is a warning. Like, you know, this is like the GAA, if they have postponed games because of the celebrations we saw at the weekend, then I think that has created a precedent whereby they will have to do it if that kind of carry on follows county games.
they're almost lucky in a way that they have something of a soft lead into the championship. We kind of almost skip over those last rounds of league games that are still outstanding and still need to be played. Those are very much a testing ground for what we're going to see going forward as regards the behaviour of people in and around grounds if they are allowed to attend them. Now, for the moment, obviously, that would appear to be not the case. But people need to actually have a bit of cop on about how this is treated and how they approach games. My worry would still be the Ulster Championships, because the numbers that we saw and the rate at which we saw them increasing last week when the Armagh story broke was on Friday, where they initially mentioned in the afternoon that there was, some members of the panel had tested positive for COVID-19 of the football panel. And then later in the evening, they had to suspend club activity, all club activity, not just games, because of the rising numbers of COVID in the province. Now, it went from they said it had doubled that day. The Northern Ireland Health Board, the figures had doubled during the course of the week. So they went up from 400 and something to, I think it was 928 on the Friday. That's in the space of like 3-4 days. And that will only, you presume, until a certain point, keep growing. And if that does happen to be the case, then we're going to be in trouble as regards getting games done in Ulster. And that's the kind of area of the country you'd be looking at. But as Alan mentioned there, getting on top of this countrywide is something that needed to happen to avoid that kind of doomsday scenario where we are looking at games being forfeited because teams just can't fulfil fixtures.
Yeah, well, he certainly didn't rule out forfeits, and that's...
nor should they, to be honest.
Prospect, nor should they. He did rule out the notion of just a GAA policy on fans. So I mentioned there were 600 fans watching the Ulster game, so potentially will you have 600 games for a game up north, or 600 at a game for a game in the Ulster Championship and then no fans down here, or will you go for a universal approach? And they said they'll go with the law of the land, so the 6 counties and the 26 counties. That's where we are at the moment. Joe, if this virus is with us for the next few years, are we going to keep putting on and off games and just get on with it? Regards, Mike. I don't know. Right now it's hard to think about the next few years at the moment.
That's the thing. There's no people kind of are texting in, and I saw a few of the tweets and stuff like that saying, are you going to get on to talking about sport, or what's the story? When are we going to actually be able to move on? There are no absolutes here. And that's something I think people have to disregard from their thinking, like, immediately and as soon as possible. And it's something that played into there being crowds on top of one another at these games. There are no absolutes. There is no, this is going to be sorted by X date, or this, it is a case of hopping from stone to stone at the minute and seeing, hopefully, our footing's sure enough that we're able to move on to the next one. But at the moment, we have taken a stumble.
No, for sure. Geez, what a day. Geez, when that leak came through last night, level 5, I just thought, oh my God. The psychology of it is actually horrifically difficult for everyone. It was a grim night last night with the realisation that was a distinct possibility. Here we are at level 3. Let's see how the next few days go. But I don't know what your reaction was, but I just thought,
I wasn't surprised. I was downhearted.
I was surprised. I didn't think level 5 was coming, I gotta say.
I need to, just from the way that the treatment of it from NPHET had been spoken about over the course of the last week, and the way the numbers have been going up exponentially, something drastic was on the cards. Now, Sean Defoe mentioned it in his voicer just before the show. There is a sense that the government are now going to have to own this. Anything that goes wrong here, it's not NPHET's fault anymore. NPHET said, listen, lads, we recommended that X, Y, and Z shouldn't happen, and you've allowed that. So they're kind of walking away. But again, their powers are kind of diminished. NPHET can recommend something down the line, and the government's need to adhere to that is suddenly tethered a bit loose.
Yeah. Okay, Rich, back to usual business tomorrow evening. Thanks very much. That is Richie McCormack. So between 8 and 9, if you don't want to hear a word about COVID, then Gary Neville and Teddy Sheringham are coming your way. We recorded this on Friday. Really good, loads of good stuff. 2 hours recorded, and it'll be up on all our social channels and the OTB Sports app. We'll play a really nice hour of it between 8 and 9. We will interrupt at any stage when Micheál Martin emerges from government buildings to give a live update on where we are. So we'll bring you his speech in full. You won't miss that. Short ad break. Rory O'Connor will talk to us Monday Night Rugby.
The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
The doors of the National Gallery of Ireland may be